Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Graduate Dentist Podcast, your go-to guide through real-world dentistry and a community amongst grads. My name's Sarah Cahuin, and today's episode is something a little bit different, but one that I think will be so valuable to many of you out there. We live in the world of digital dentistry. There is no denying of it, but it's not something that we are exposed to almost at all throughout dental school. We get trained in how to take PVS impressions, how to use heavy body, light body, pour up stone models. But when we enter the real world, we're dealing with scanners, we're dealing with in-house mills, and we're often having to design and fabricate these ourselves. But we weren't trained to be lab techs, and it can be really, what can I do? What can't I do? And particularly when working with foreign software, the last thing we want to do is go messing around with the settings and violating minimum thickness. And so in today's episode, I'm very excited to be joined by Dr. Neeraj Surathu, who is a New Zealand-based dentist who recently completed his further specialisation in prosthodontics in Florida. But what makes Neeraj super special and unique is his years of experience working as a lab tech. From digitally designing facially driven smiles to 3D printing surgical guides for all our next cases, Neeraj is no stranger to the world of digital dentistry. Now, this podcast conversation was never intended to be a podcast. In fact, I actually reached out to Neeraj just to get some help and some guidance on how to better use exocad within our clinic to better design our in-house crowns. And as we were talking about it, I realized, you know what? If I am wondering these questions, I am sure there is someone else out there who is wondering the same thing. And after all, that is always my goal with the graduate dentist, to ask those questions that we're all too scared to ask out of fear of it being a stupid or a silly question. And so here it is, all in one episode. What we have done is I've actually sent Neeraj two of my own cases, one full coverage crown preparation and one onlay preparation. And I've given it to Neeraj to look at, to critique, to give feedback on what I could do to help him from the eyes of a lab technician. We then go through his workflow, his process, the step-by-step of what we need to do to design an ideal crown, what we can adjust, what things to look out for, everything from your tooth positioning, your cusp heights, your proximal contacts, your occlusal contacts, the marginal thickness, your minimum thickness, all of these things that can be really overwhelming when you don't know what it is that you want to achieve. And what I love about getting to do this episode with Neeraj is not only getting to see it through the lens of someone who's a dentist, better yet a prosthodontist, but also someone with a wealth of knowledge and experience being on the other side, having worked in the lab, worked behind the scenes, and been a part of the milling, the designing, the fabrication process that oftentimes as dentists we're not privy to or we're just completely oblivious of. And so for this episode, you guys can actually follow along with the video recording. You can watch our screen share as we go through every single step. And what I really hope you guys are able to do is to stop, start, repeat, re-listen. Take this with you to clinic, have it set up next to the computer as you open up the software, and we're there as a walkthrough to help take you through every single step as you design your own crowns. And hopefully it makes it that little less overwhelming and daunting. Now, I know that we specifically talk about using exocad, but I think a lot of these ideas and concepts translate to whatever software it is that you may be using. And so I hope you guys find it enjoyable and valuable, and I really look forward to hearing all your feedback on this slightly different type of podcast episode. In other news, I'm very excited to announce that our Graduate Dentist Sydney meetup is just 2 weeks away on Sunday, July 13th at 4 Points by Sheraton in Chippendale. After the success of our Brisbane meetup just a few weeks ago and just how heartwarming and wholesome it was such a wonderful reminder of everything that we do for the graduate dentists, of creating a safe space where we don't feel so isolated and alone. And so I'm so excited to get to do this all over again in Sydney, bringing our community together, but also having our wonderful special guest speakers, Dr. Johan Choi, Dr. David Attia, who I'll be doing a live podcast interview with, and our absolute favorite, Dr. Annalene Weston. Tickets are $55 or $35 if you're a student and you DM me. Make sure you register through our website at thegraduatedentist.com, and I can't wait to see you all there. In the meantime, I hope you really enjoy this episode with Neeraj. Dr. Neeraj Surathu, welcome to the Graduate Dentist Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Neeraj, I'm very excited to have you join me on the show. And I guess how this all came about was quite fun and serendipitous because obviously you're someone that I have heard of quite a lot through my brother. And then we had a brief encounter during his recent his R3 course where he brought you on as a guest lecturer to talk us through the world of, I guess, digital dentistry and the lab process and designing. And I just sat there watching it and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. I was like pestering you just on WhatsApp. I'm like, Neeraj, I've got a few cases of just single units, like simple crowns that I would really like to learn a lot more about. And I wanted to pick your brain, and you were so generous to offer to share your time. And then we thought, if I'm wondering these questions, I bet our listeners will also wonder these questions. So we thought, why don't we record it and turn it into a podcast? Something a little bit different. I've not done this before because it'll be quite interactive. I guess us just chatting through video and sharing screen and looking at how the design process works. But before we dive into it, I guess for our listeners that, may not know who you are, you're a prosthodontist.
Correct.
Who's had quite a lot of experience with dental technicians or dental tech as well. Can you kind of share your journey thus far?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the people listening in probably don't know who I am because I'm not, I'm originally from New Zealand, but I didn't do my dental school in New Zealand or Australia. So I think a lot of people would appreciate the introduction. So I actually did my dental school in India, which is my 5-year undergraduate dental degree. So that was a big story as to how I got there. I actually started off doing engineering at first, but
no way.
four,
Yeah.
4 months into it, I'm like, you know what, this is not the degree for me. It's not my career path. And I switched to dentistry. My parents are dentists as well. So that's kind of something that gave me the push, but it wasn't something where they forced me into it. So I started dental school in India, finished 5 years of that. And I came back to New Zealand because I wanted to come back home. I consider New Zealand to be home. So 5 years was done. And because I don't get my licensure here in New Zealand or in Australia through an Indian dental degree, I had to think of other alternatives. So for people who are listening in who are international students, if you're international degree holders, you have to take some examinations, or you could alternatively consider to do another degree. And we don't want to study all over again and do another degree. So if I am going to do another degree, I decided it would be something where I'm actually advancing rather than doing an additional BDS degree. So I thought, why don't I specialize? But in the meantime, while I was waiting for, when I was waiting on making these decisions in my life, for about a year and a half, I had to see what my next plan was. So this was me on the drawing board with my father, who's also a dentist. And it was funny, at the time, he had a clinical denture technician working for him. And that denture technician actually had quit, which was actually quite convenient for me because he asked me, hey, listen, you just finished dental school. You're not sure what you're going to be doing. If you are going to be applying for some degree or you want to do some exams, so forth, it's going to take you some time. I need an in-house dental lab technician. Do you want to take over the job? I said, sure, I got nothing better going on, so let me go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
So I actually started off working as a unlicensed dental technician. So it was just me working as a part-time assistant, part-time dental technician. This is where the world of digital dentistry opened up to me. My dad lectures a lot on digital dentistry, especially having so many years with digital implantology, with planning for surgical guides and so forth. And so I started off getting into that. Everybody knows Sarek, so I got into that as well because that's also something he's been a long-term user of. That's where my journey of being a digital dentist or a dentist who uses digital workflows even started. And I guess where the pros degree came in was because I was making my decision on how I get my license in New Zealand and Australia. And while I was working in the lab doing a lot of these digital workflows, I had so many questions. I'm designing something. So, for a lot of people, they finish dental school. And then once they go out of dentistry, they think, okay, let me go ahead and look into the digital workflow. Let me see if I can expand on something before they start getting into some advanced stuff. Whereas for me, before I even started practicing, I jumped into dental dentistry as a technician. But I had so many questions. I'm like designing something, I'm printing it, milling it, and I'm like, wait, how is this supposed to fit here? How is this supposed to work clinically? And I had so many questions every day for dad. And he's busy with his practice. He's busy with his teaching. He's like, listen, if you have all these questions, I think you need to do a pros degree. And that was the end of that
Yeah.
conversation. That's basically where the application for my prosthodontic degree started. And for a lot of you who don't know, I did my pros degree in the US and I applied. Just happened to get in, got lucky with that, and for some reason they liked me, which is good. And I ended up in Florida and did my 3 years there.
I see. I want to circle back to a point that you made, Niraj, that like it sparked something in me because I was like, oh, that's the thought that made me want to reach out to you was when you were saying like you'd had that experience, obviously going through your BDS, but then doing being a lab tech. You're like, oh, you're designing things, but why is it this or what is that, and trying to translate that into the mouth, right? And for me, I have that clinical experience, but I'm still a recent grad, right? So you're still finding your feet. But then within our clinic, we use, well, I work between two clinics. One of them uses a CEREC, the other one uses exocad. But then when I'm sitting there designing a crown, I'm like, well, what do I actually want this to look like?
Yeah.
Or what am I actually what are the parameters that I actually want to achieve, and how does that influence the actual clinical outcome? Because it's very easy to send it off to a lab and then you kind of palm off that responsibility to your lab tech, right? But then when you're actually doing it yourself, you start actually questioning all of those things because it's now in your hands and you're overseeing every step of the way. So you become a lot more curious about, well, why do we do this or why do we do that? And then you then wonder, well, what does my lab tech try to achieve? But then my lab tech is a tech, and they're great at designing this, but they're not a dentist. So where is that marry? How do they marry? And so I really wanted to pick your brain because you've kind of got that experience on both fronts, being a lab tech, but now having gone and done your specialist studies and qualifications. I wonder, having now completed your further training, has it answered all of those questions that you had back when you were doing?
No, it's a good question. And honestly, it's answered all of those questions and more. And frankly, I have probably more questions now. It's all a matter
Yeah.
of, okay, now I'm dealing with the entire prosthodontic workflow, dealing with more complex cases. And I'm thinking, okay, now how do I modernize these into a digital workflow? That's where the questions come up. But going back to your question, so this is what, people, you always hear the phrase where people say, to be a good digital dentist, you need to be a good analog dentist. So you need to understand the analog principles to be a good digital dentist. A lot of people say that just from what they experience after they finish dental school and they try to go into digital workflows. But I would say I'm one of the few who's actually started off with the digital workflow. And then I'm thinking, gosh, I want to go do a pros degree where I understand the true analog science behind these things. Um, I've experienced what it's like trying to do things just completely digitally, being a lab tech working for Dad and Mom. And then at that point, I had so many questions which just told me that there were so many analog principles that I did not quite understand in my dental degree. I mean, the dental degree, once you're out of there and you actually have to go into private practice, that's a lot of questions. It's just 5 years of getting the degree, fast paced, getting your requirements done, and you just want to get out of there. And then after that, it's like, okay, what do I do now? Do I have some mentors who are going to look after me?
Yeah.
You're completely clueless, and I understand what that's like. But for me, going into digital dentistry, I very quickly understood that I needed to strengthen my analog skills, which included me even when I was doing my pros degree in the US. I did a lot of my cases digitally. But in my first 2 years, I'm sitting there pouring up models, I'm mounting cases, I'm doing wax subs, my hand, I'm doing everything in the analog fashion, understanding everything step by step. And then when the digital needed to come in, it was like, oh, I got to turn that into a computer screen and just make that work. And it was just, everything just fit in. But yes, a pros degree answered a lot of my questions. And not to say that a lot of people have to go do a pros degree. It's just my situation is something where I chose to do it. But it's something that really helped me understand a lot of my questions. Yeah.
There's a lot that comes with leaving university and properly adulting that no one really prepares you for. As a new grad with an income and newfound responsibilities we don't know what to do with, managing finances can be really tough. That's where JS Medical and Dental Finance comes in. Specializing in financing options tailored to medical and dental professionals, JSMDF is a completely independent broker dedicated to finding the best bank and lender for your unique situation. led by the incredible Jason Savage, who personally came to my rescue and worked his magic and helped me secure a loan before I even started working. JSMDF is committed to supporting you throughout your personal and professional journey in whatever way you need. Whether you're looking to buy a house, a car, a practice, or pay off that year-long CPD course you signed yourself up for, JSMDF offer comprehensive advice tailored to your short and long-term plans. Their goal is to be with you from day one and thoroughly understand your financial needs and provide solutions that best work for you. And so if you're looking for some advice or you simply want to explore your options, get in touch with Jason and his team. A big thank you to JSMDF for helping make being an adult that extra bit easier and for supporting the graduate dentist community. So what does your day-to-day look like now? Where are you in your current journey?
So I just came. So I'm back in New Zealand now. So I left the US in about February. So we're in June right now.
Yeah, it's
So
gone
it's been
by.
a yeah, it goes by really fast. Gosh, it's been a lot of moving for me. At this point, we're actually setting up a new practice. Me, mom, and dad in Hamilton. So it's gonna be just the three of us. So it's just gonna be a family dental clinic. So we're waiting for that to be set up. So there's a lot of building work going on. In the meantime, I'm just working part time. I have some jobs lined up where I work do some part time work, but a lot of it is just a lot of my time is being taken up by setting up the clinic with a lot of building and planning and so forth. In the meantime, however, I do a lot of planning on the side and designing as well, just to keep busy and keep my digital skills also kind of fresh. Let's just say. So I do a
Yeah.
lot of that.
In terms of that, like the work that you do, then are these oftentimes patients that you see yourself, or are you helping other clinicians with their workflow? I guess what kind of cases are you doing on a day to day?
It's both.
Mhm,
On a day-to-day basis, I'm not working full-time yet. When I say
mhm.
part-time, it's probably once a week or once in 2 weeks as of now because my focus is on setting up our
Yeah, that's
practice.
of course. Yeah.
But a lot of my time also goes up in helping dentists with their workflow. So, for example, something as simple as, let's just say, trying to understand even just a surgical guide.
Hmm.
A lot of dentists start off with taking a CBC. They start off with taking an intraoral scan. This is all common knowledge by now that you got to merge them together and start doing an implant.
Hmm.
But an implant plan. But when you actually have to go ahead and design a surgical guide, do you want to go ahead and send that to the lab to print it? Do you want to print this by yourself? Do you want to get a 3D printer in your own office?
Hmm.
Is there a return on investment on that? Is it affordable? A lot of those questions and helping dentists with their workflows is something that I'm quite involved with.
Yeah.
We actually have some courses coming up in New Zealand and even in Australia. You're
Yeah.
based in Brisbane, right?
I am. You're coming to Brisbane in August,
We
right?
in August, yes, August
Yeah.
the 1st to 3rd.
Yeah.
So we actually teach up 3D printing courses where we help them. So this really occupies my time as well, being involved in teaching along with my dad. So I bring a lot to the table with my digital knowledge as well and my experience with 3D printing and milling. So it's really nice that I have that to keep me busy while we're setting up our practice.
Yeah, beautiful. I guess when you mention about like, setting up the practice and like the whole question about running your own business and everything, I often say to my friends when we have these conversations, it's like, yeah, you go do all this studying to learn how to be a dentist, but then the thing with practice ownership is that, I mean, we didn't do a degree in business, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
I
so
wish.
it's a whole different thing. We'll have to go study another another
Yeah,
degree.
exactly.
But yeah, the reason I was asking you all of this, I guess, was just to kind of understand the space that you work in, and as like even just as like a lab tech, the kind of cases that you would be working on, and then as having done your further training, right, like the kind of cases that as a prosthodontist you would be doing. Just I'm thinking as like a general dentist, when we refer cases, right, it's like if it's a root canal and you're stuck on it, yep, you refer it off to a endodontist. Or if it's like ortho, you refer. But I feel like pros is something where there's so much overlap between like what's within a general dentist's capability and then what becomes too complicated and is better off in a pros degree.
Hmm.
And so I guess I wanted to ask, like, what falls under your scope of practice, and what kind of work would it be, from like, single units to full mouth rehabs to surgery? I guess, does that make sense? Like, where is your scope? And I guess for you specifically, um, obviously being really passionate about digital dentistry, where would your ideal scope be, and what would you ideally like to be doing? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a question I get asked pretty often. There's a lot
Yeah.
of overlap between general dentistry, restorative dentistry, and prosthodontics. So it's like,
Mm.
oh, why do I need to refer to the prosthodontist if I can do
Yeah.
this all myself?
Mm-hmm.
I would say that a lot of the cases that are not within that overlap are the cases that the general dentist or common restorative dentist is not comfortable dealing with. So it's going to be those hard cases which they haven't tackled before or they don't have the respective training for. A lot of people have the idea that a full mouth rehab should only be done by a prosthodontist, or a certain case should only be done by a prosthodontist, and so forth. I think that's I don't entirely find that to be true. It really depends on what the dentist is comfortable with handling. Um, Unfortunately, from what I'm aware of, a lot of the prosthodontists get the difficult cases or the difficult patients that they deal with, which which actually I'm looking forward to treating more because I mean, the more challenging, the more interesting it is for me. So it's I can see how I can tackle that situation and make it simpler. It's interesting and it just keeps me on my toes. But I think it's usually those difficult cases that not everybody who wants to treat. Those are the kind of cases that we're going to get as prosthodontists. With regards to full mouth rehabs, when it comes to opening up the vertical dimension, I mean, the most common question that I get from a lot of general dentists is, do we have to open up the video in this case? How much do I open the video in this case? Those are the type of cases that I see quite commonly where somebody's like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and refer this out. And, that's something we're trained for, which is good. Um, I would say even something like even all on X these days, a lot of people are restoring these cases pretty comfortably because dental labs are able to go ahead and create the restorations quite easily with digital dentistry, design it, mill it, go from a prototype straight to the finals. The workflow is pretty seamless, but I would say a lot of all on X cases, um, specialists who are placing the implants, like let's say an oral surgeon who's placing the implants himself, the cases where the oral surgeon would like a prosthodontist to restore those type of cases are also going to be cases that are going to come to prosthodontists simply because they prefer to work within that specialist space. Um, so I would say those are the type of cases that we would see quite commonly, and of course, dentures. A lot of people say, I don't want to deal with denture cases anymore," and those are the
Yeah.
fun cases that we get. I
Yeah.
personally enjoy doing dentures.
Mm-hmm.
One good thing about dentures is within a digital workflow, it's very efficient, easy for me, and quite honestly, it's very quick turnaround. I'm not waiting for a lab to go ahead and fabricate these because I have my own 3D printers and my own mills. And with regards to materials, that's a whole other different topic. But I go ahead and design everything in house. I fabricate everything in house, and it's just easier for me. So I would foresee that as time goes by, a lot of these denture cases, because of the quick turnaround potential, those are going to be coming to my into my chair pretty often as well.
It's interesting because I guess you get that glimpse into the power of digital dentistry and how it's evolved. But I guess being like a general dentist that doesn't see that behind the scenes, like we don't actually know what's going on within the that like what's being printed, what's being milled. We just get the box delivered to us, and then yeah, it's just wondering how that translates. Like what you were saying, like understanding the analog versus the digital, understanding the limitations within both. I oftentimes hear people saying like, when is it appropriate to take a scan versus when is it still better to take a physical impression. I guess I'm still trying to figure out, yeah, like, and respecting the limitations of each modality. Niraj, then we've talked a lot about like your background and your passion and your area of expertise, but perhaps bringing it into something more specific and tangible. What started our entire conversation was that I was sharing with you that within our practice, we have a mill. I guess to be more specific, and so that there's context to it, is that at my practice we have a plan mill,
Mhm.
and we have a Medit scanner, and we have the ability to mill just Emacs. Not zirconia, nothing else. It's just Emacs, and we design it on exocad. And so when I first joined this practice, I've never used the scanner before. In dental school, it was just physical impressions, and so the first thing was okay, learning how to use a scanner. You take a scan, and then all right, you open up on exocad, and it's like now design a crown, and I was like, oh, okay. At first I was relying on my principal dentist to kind of help me with it, and then we had some of our like lab coordinators who are just, they're not formally trained, they're our dental assistants who have been guided by some of the other dentists within the practice, and they design it, but then they'll come to me and being like, oh, where do you want your contacts? Does this look okay? Or how did we get the anatomy? And so then I decided, you know what? If these are the crowns that I'm going to put in my patient, I want to understand that better. And I'd start comparing, okay, the ones that we made in house versus the one that got back from the lab, right? And I wanted to understand, okay, why does this fit well from the lab and why does this not fit when I designed it? And I feel like my understanding of it is quite rudimentary. And so
Mhm.
what I thought would be good was I downloaded the STL files. I think I given you two cases, Niraj. One was of a onlay preparation, one was of a full coverage crown. I think I also showed you the crowns that we designed. And then
Yes.
I wanted you to give, I guess, your feedback on, and I wonder how we can do this, whether it's just seeing your workflow
Mhm.
without having seen what I've already designed, just to see
Sure.
what you would do and
Sure.
kind of talk
Yeah.
through like your checklist of, okay, this is the scan, and even getting your critique on, okay, the scan, are the margins clear, or what would you recommend for it to be better? Like being, I really want to go like just hear your train of thought as someone who receives this from the other end.
Yeah.
What are you assessing and what makes your life easier? Right?
Of
And
course.
then that checklist of this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm checking for, and this is how we get a good outcome. And then you
Mhm.
can look at what I did.
Yeah. Of course.
And you can critique it. I'm happy for you to be brutal. I'm happy for you to be honest because I think that's where we learn the most.
Yeah.
What do you
No,
think? Mm,
honestly, I looked at what you designed as well. It's
mm,
very good. One thing I'll tell you, it'll probably be something where when you watch me, you
yeah.
may pick up a couple of extra tips,
Hmm.
or you might just look at the workflow and it verifies to you, and it's like, oh, that's exactly what I did. And I know if he's done it, then I know I'm doing it right. It's something like that. So it could be either or.
I
Exactly.
wanted that
It's
because it's just like I'm doing it, but I don't know if what I am doing is correct. And I just wanted to
right.
get the perspective of someone who does this. And when I first watched you design this at Paul's lecture, you were like, oh, I just do this when I'm watching TV. Right. And I was like, wow, I want to get to that point because that's not what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I'd love to be able to pick your brain and just see, like, in the minds of, a lab tech, what are you looking for? And what are you
Of course.
aiming? Yeah. And afterwards, as you're doing that, I guess one of the things that I was also wondering, and perhaps we'll tackle this afterwards, is the differences between different software. So I mentioned before that at one of my practices, this is the workflow, whereas at
Mhm.
another one of my practices, we have a CEREC. And
Mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong, when I watch both of these workflows, I feel like it's like a Mac versus like a your Windows software,
Yeah.
right? Where it's just one is like everything's all hidden behind the scenes
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
just does all the designing for you. And it's user friendly, it's easy, but you don't necessarily have to do all that decision making. Whereas the other one is just like, oh, you can control so many more of the parameters. But as a rookie, it can be quite overwhelming.
Yeah, I'm a Windows user, so
Yeah.
in this comparison, I don't know which is considered better,
Oh,
Windows or
okay, it's
Mac.
true, right? It's like
I'm um,
Android versus iPhone, right? Like,
I'm guessing you're a Mac user.
yeah.
I would think that for a Mac user, or rather that Mac workflow, which is simpler and straightforward, CEREC was what would fall under that.
Yeah.
With exocad, there's so many buttons. There's way too many buttons. In fact, it's definitely something that's more for the advanced user.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's also not. Like, for
Mm.
example, with CEREC, because there's so many people who've been doing CEREC for so long, who've been teaching CEREC for so long, and it's straightforward step by step, you will actually see that exocad is also step by step as long as you focus on the options that only matter to what you desire.
That's fair.
There's different softwares out there. I mean, there's a lot of free software that can even do this. There's even AI software that's available that you pay them for like a monthly subscription and you can do this.
Mm-hmm.
But the advantage from me with something like exocad, and I started off with CEREC. I did
Mm-hmm.
InLab, if you're aware of that. That's the lab level software
Mm-hmm.
of CEREC. CEREC is very limited to only doing crown bridge and implant crowns and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But then let's say you've done that for about 2 or 3 years and you're good at it, and you're
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, what's next? Are you gonna go spend money buying an exocad software, or
Yeah.
if you had the exocad software to begin with, when you're ready to scale and go to the next step, it's already there. I can,
Yeah.
because with the freedom of exocad, I can go ahead and design everything from single crowns to all on nexus to guides, full arch guides. I mean, the possibilities are just endless,
Endless there.
and I
Yeah.
have the freedom to do that because I have access to exocad from, and that's always something. But I understand what you mean. I started off with CEREC. It was so easy. I tell people, click this, just keep my eyes closed, just click the next
Yeah, just click
button.
next,
It'll
right?
work. Yeah,
Yeah.
AI does it all, and it's perfect. But even
Yeah.
exocad can be like that as long as you
You just know
understand it.
what you're
But
looking for.
yeah, I'll go
Yeah.
ahead and share my screen, but I see your point. It can be pretty intimidating. You're
Mm-hmm.
looking at this and it's like it's got a very Windows or Android feel to it, and it's
You
just like
know?
I don't want to mess with this.
Yeah.
It's just a mess out there. But honestly, it can be
Mm-hmm.
fun. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're watching movies and doing it.
Yeah.
So first thing in exocad, I mean, a lot of people are confused by what's going on even here. They see
Mm-hmm.
like this lab prescription,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of looks like the CEREC one, but obviously the CEREC one is just so much simpler to understand. We're going to bring in a case where we have a 4-6 crown that's already prepped. So I'm going to go ahead and click on 4-6 over here.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you're going to see a ton of options over here, and that can be intimidating to begin with. But then if you actually break it down and look at what's important, we're just doing a 4-6 crown. So we just look at crowns. So we focus on the options that we have over here. If you know that you're not doing any of these, you know that you're only working on an anatomic crown, which is basically a monolithic crown as well. If anybody's ever stuck on any step on exocad, you can always, and this has been a huge help for me, you always click this button over here that actually will take you to, I'm not sure if you can see this on my screen, but it will
Yep.
actually take you to what's called exocad wiki, that just literally tells you everything out there.
Um,
So I'm not sure, for those of you who are not familiar with this option, it just takes you to like a little wiki that just gives you a helping tool for every single option that's out there step by step. So that's something that I used quite extensively when I was starting off. And
yep.
of course, I had YouTube videos as well that really helped me.
Was that just a button? Where did you find that wiki?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It was
Yeah.
this helping. It's like a question mark.
Oh, just up in the top corner.
Just
Okay.
that. You just press that and it opens
Yeah.
up immediately. And
Okay.
this isn't just for this function, by the way. I'll show you
Yeah.
that. I'll show you where else it pops up. But
Mm.
so we'll go to anatomic crown. That's what we're going to go ahead and select. And in this case, let's say we're going to go ahead and mill Emax. Okay, so we've got lithium disilicate, which is what we're going to do here. Now, first question I get from people when they're starting off, they send me a picture of this screen, and they're like, "What is going on here? What am I supposed to do?" I'll just break it down for those of you who are starting off with exocad. Um, I guess if I had an example design, which I can show later with maybe with Erica's design, just to show what I would change in terms of some margin adaptation. But the first thing that I would go ahead and change in this step is I actually don't change anything over here. I'm not dealing with implant retain crown, so I don't need to look at that. Again, it's all a matter of focusing on what's necessary. The only thing that I need to select over here is pull to margin, where it's basically me designing a wax up and it gets adapted to that margin. And the small things that I change in all of these sliders over here, minimum thickness. Yes, we've selected lithium disilicate, but zero point 0.8 is not enough. So we got to make sure that we actually dial that up to about, let's say, at least 1 millimeter just to be safe. And I go to the advanced parameters. Again, it looks like it's just a whole bunch of numbers over here that you just don't want to touch. And I completely understand that. That's how it started off with me as well. The only things that I actually would change here is the horizontal crown margin and the angle crown margin. Now, that can sound confusing. I'm not going to explain what that is at this point because I am going to tweak these while we go through the workflow, and I can show you in the design what these actually change. All it changes is basically the emergence profile from the finish line up until the margin of the crown and so forth. So the only thing that I literally change here, because this step is not available within the design, is the beginning of the cement gap, which, as if I hover my mouse on top of these things, it'll literally tell you what it is. It's just the distance from the margin to the starting of the cement gap. Because when you're designing these crowns, you need to factor in a cement gap so you have a space for your cement. And that's all this does. And I'm just going to dial that down to about a zero point 0.3. So just remember, for those of you who are doing single crown designs, this is pretty much the only thing that I change. It's highlighted in pink, so that's good. So, and the minimum thickness, I dial it up to 1 for Emax because that's what is recommended. And you want to make sure you have that, especially for your load bearing areas. And so I've only changed this, guys, and I've only changed this, and I'm just going to hit OK. So that prescription is done. Sometimes people will go ahead and click on this and click on options like adjacent tooth and so forth. That's honestly not necessary. This is pretty much all you need. Just select your crown. It'll automatically pop in this antagonist in there, which is good because that means that you will have an upper jaw scan that gets imported in. That's the only reason it asks for that. So This is it. This is basically the prescription. This is usually what people look at and they're like, you know what, I'm done with exocad. The moment they open up this prescription and they see all these options, you're like, yeah, I quit. I'm going back to CEREC.
I often say on the podcast that the more I do, the more I realize just how little I know, and how dentistry is just one of those careers where you never stop learning. But let's be real, getting the right training can be expensive, time consuming, and sometimes just straight up overwhelming. That's where Ripe Global comes in. Founded by Dr. Lincoln Harris, Ripe Global is completely changing the way that we learn. They offer immersive, hands-on training that actually fits into your life. Whether it's through improving your preps, getting faster with composites, or tackling more complex cases, you'll be learning from some of the best clinicians in the world without having to take time off work or spend thousands on travel. And so if you're serious about upskilling and boosting your confidence in the clinic, check out Ripe Global today. Hit the link in our show notes and let's start learning smarter, not harder. I actually think within our workflow, I don't know if this step is bypassed because we do the scan on Medit and then you can choose like the tooth, the crown, like you do your lab prescription on Medit and then there's like the exocad button and it opens that up and then it goes straight
100%.
to the next. So I wonder whether that's already been incorporated or integrated.
All of this is integrated, but not to the measurements and the settings that
Yeah, that's
you
what I was going
want,
to say.
unfortunately.
So
Yes.
I'm not sure whether there's like other areas that you can then go select and change those measurements.
Possibly. I've never been one to jump in from a design or a scanning software directly into doing it, like that kind of workflow. CEREC does a very good job of that, but again, in CEREC you can adjust your parameters as well, and even in exocad you can. It is just that you have to make sure you know exactly where to adjust them.
Yep,
And as we go through the design, I can show you at what step that comes
you
in.
can do that. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
So I've selected my prescription. None of these options pop up. That's only because you got to hit save, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah.
So once you hit save, this was another thing. I got a picture of like, oh, you know what? exocad doesn't work. I'm done. It's like, guys.
You're so close. Yeah.
Oh my God. So it's like, you go ahead to design and that's basically it. It's going to open up exocad over here. So it's asking us right now, it says load the lower jaw scan. I've seen people make this mistake as well. They jump in and they think, oh, they want a jaw scan first. They don't read lower jaw. They just read low jaw scan and they go for the upper jaw, and then everything is flipped up and down, which is another confusion. So I always go through this lower jaw and I go ahead and make sure I click on the right one and I say open. Now it says upper jaw, which is your antagonist. I click on upper jaw and that's what it gets. So we've got a quadrant scan over here. This step that says adjust scan data orientation, sometimes if your orientation is like this, it needs to be facing the occlusal view as it depicts over here in the image that you have. So if it's something that's sideways or something like this, just make sure you right click, rotate that, bring it dead on occlusal, and then you can move forward to your next step. Now, margin line detection, this is also something where I find a lot of people struggle. They're thinking, oh, there's something that says detect. What is that? So set a few points to generate the margin automatically. Oh, automatically, I'm down for that. So they'll go ahead and start clicking, and then they'll click a few points, and it's like, okay, this is becoming a bit messy over there. Oh, it's getting worse. And it just keeps going. And then I get a photo of this and I'm like, yeah, I'm done with exocad. So unfortunately, this option works efficiently only if you have a very, very, very clear margin.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you've got enough retraction, you've got all of that tissue completely out of the way, and you've got a crisp margin, it will work efficiently. But I almost 98% of the time never use this option. I'll go ahead and clear that. The option I always click is number 2. Again, guys, we have so many options over here, but if you actually look at the ones that I'm focusing on and you just dial in on those, it can be so easy. So I'll just click on correct and draw, and I'll just say, I don't want magnetic. I just say draw free. This literally, for those of you who use CEREC, this is the manual margin drawing. You know how you have the manual and the automatic?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this option is just the manual one in CEREC. So I basically click, I go ahead and click, and I simply move forward with my clicks.
I was going to say, when you are looking at it, are you basing it on what you can visually see? And you know how there's that little pop-up there that shows you the slope there? Do you assess that, and which part of the slope are you aiming for as well?
Great question. So yeah, I was just gonna get into that. So I actually have 3 things when I teach people is I always look at 3 things.
Mm.
First thing I say is I like working off of color scans. The
Mm.
reason is, you have the ability of you're looking at a margin over here that's just it's all the same color. It's a monochromatic digital STL file,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know which one's the tissue, which one's the margin. So the first thing is a color scan usually helps with that. And you have the option of going into this type of a monochromatic color by the click of a button. You can just toggle color and get out of the color as much as you want, but having that color gives you that clear visualization of which is tissue and which is margin to begin with, if your scan doesn't pick up the margin as crisply as you want it to be. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing. The second thing that we also have is, let me go ahead and clear up this margin. The second thing that we have, this option that we have here called True Smile. This is actually just to make your restorations look prettier, so you can take a quick screenshot and put it on Instagram so it looks nice. That's basically what I use it for.
Yeah.
But there is an added tool functionality to it in this step where you're choosing your margin, where if I go ahead and click that, you see what it
Ah,
does? What it
yeah.
basically does, it picks up those depressions, so it notices where the elevations are throughout the software. So it notices that there's an elevation over here, but there's a nice clear depression right over here.
Mm-hmm.
I find this tool, it's I wouldn't say it's 100% accurate.
But
For
it helps.
example,
Mm.
it helps. This has picked up the
Yeah.
differentiation between your soft tissue and your tooth, but that's not where the finish line is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the third option, which I look at, which is exactly what Erica brought up. You guys can see this little pop up on our screen where I've got a dot, but we've also got this little silhouette going on in the middle over there. And we can actually see the margin as I move across it. You can actually appreciate the slope of the margin. And
Mm-hmm.
there's an arrow that actually points to the location of that finish line where you're clicking it. So if I was obviously down here, I'm in
Mm.
tissue. But
Mm-hmm.
if I scroll up there, I can visualize that margin. And then within this little zoomed in cross section view or whatever you call it, I can
Mm-hmm.
actually see if I'm exactly at that slope of that finish line. And now I know that I've accurately marked my finish line, if that makes sense.
And so you're aiming for, I guess, that highest point. Like this little silhouette here is a cross section of that
Exactly.
area, right? Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I know for a fact that your finish line is up
Yeah.
here and not there. But
Mm-hmm.
this True Smile function helps me
Yeah.
differentiate between some of the tissue and the rest of the tooth prep.
I was going to say your point number one, where you said it's easier to look off of a color scan rather than this monochromatic STL file. Is there a way that you can do that on exocad? Or normally, how I've done it is Control Alt Tab and just like between the two screens, like I have the Medit scan, which is in color, and then I'll
Oh,
try
I
to
see.
line it up to be somewhat like in the same orientation, and then just switch between the two tabs to confirm. Is there another way to do that?
Yeah, so I used to do
Mm,
that pretty often. I think that's why I
mm.
have glasses, because I used to keep looking at the screen and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But so this is an STL file. Are
Mm.
you familiar with what's a PLY file?
No.
So a PLY file, I'll actually open up the folder that I had for you.
Mhm.
So you can see here we have PLY files in this
Mhm.
folder that I have. It's not one of your cases, but I
Mhm.
just happen to put it in this folder if you wanted to dive into something else later. But
Mhm.
let's look at the case that we're working on. All
Mhm.
of these right now are STL files. Okay. STL files, that stands for standard tessellation language. I'm just being fancy with the terminology. It doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
But STL is basically something that's monochromatic. But if I go into a PLY file, that's actually something that has color in it.
Ah, okay.
The software itself has the PLY actually has color in it. And within exocad, this is just on mesh mixer, but within exocad, you'll have a toggle option like I have over here to just switch between color and otherwise if I need to.
So would this work if you, rather than uploading the STL file, you uploaded the PLY file instead?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and Medit has the option of uploading three file options, and that's the case with most scanners. You have
Mhm.
an STO, you have an OBJ, and you have a PLY. Notice
Mhm.
how I don't tell you the full abbreviation for the other two because I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
But I know that the OBJ and the PLYs have color in them, so that's built into it. So,
Mhm.
for example, if I was, let's say, if I'm marking a margin, I go ahead on exocad, I mark it, and then I can switch the color. Oh, just to be sure,
Mhm.
yep, that looks good. Go back to my monochromatic, and I would mark it. But that's just
Mhm.
an example of what is capable with a PLY scan, and just wanted to show that.
Yeah, understood. Thanks for clarifying
Mhm.
that.
No problem. So we'll go ahead and finish our margin. I know which one was the finish line at that point, but these ones over here, obviously this isn't quite crisp. Usually the advice that I give people when it comes to scanning, they always ask me, oh, I can
Mm.
get a better I can better get a better representation of my finish line if I would just take an impression. And
Mm-hmm.
for most cases, yes, that would be true.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just think about the analog principles of taking a physical impression. When
Mm-hmm.
you're going ahead and placing your retraction cord, and the goal is, what sort of technique do you use? Do you use like a single cord? Do you go double cord? What's your workflow?
I'm for a very long time I was just doing a single chord, and then I know that, and I'm trying to do it more, is doing going in with a second chord and then taking that out. But I will admit that I don't always do that. And this is why I wanted your feedback on what would make your life easier and ensure that I get better, scans and better margins.
Of course, and
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of people use single chord. I know people who've used even no chord for some subgingival margins, and they get the
Hmm.
impression. Don't ask me how, but I prefer
Yeah.
going for double chord technique. That's what I use in my analog principles.
Hmm.
It's no different from a
A
digital
digital.
scan.
Yeah.
In even in the analog world, when you're taking a physical impression, the purpose of that double chord technique, when you go ahead and remove that double zero chord and you've got just your triple zero in there, you want to be able to I leave it in there for about 5 minutes or so, so I let that tissue stabilize, and then I go ahead and take it out, make sure everything is dry. The moment when I know that I can actually take a physical impression at that point and inject my light body is the moment when I know that I can actually see very clearly my finish line. So if I can see the finish line, my impression is going to pick it up. So that's usually the goal, even for an analog impression. It's not just dumping double coat in there and then taking it out and just hope that you can squeeze some light body in there. You wait for about 5 minutes and then let that tissue stay in that retracted position. And then when you gently take out that second cord, you will actually see that that tissue remains retracted. You can physically see your margins if you take a mirror to it. And then you can go ahead, inject your light body in the right location, and pick up a very beautiful margin, or in this case, the finish line, sorry. So you can go ahead and do that with an analog impression. It is the same principle that translates over to digital. As long as you can see your margins, the scanner will pick it up. Now, if you're dealing with some deep subgingival margins, what options do you have? You do have the option of using chemical retraction paste, or you can just take a red burr to it without any water, and just if you can even remove some of the tissue that's in the way as well. You're not going to harm it that much as long as you make sure that you go very gently with it. It's not a problem. A lot of people overthink it when it comes to somebody who advises them to just take a burr to the tissue and move it out of the way. It really is acceptable in some cases, as long as you're not going beyond that and going into bone. I've seen people do that as well, but
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
it's something where you got to know your limitations. But the goal in the end, whether you're taking an analog or you're taking a digital impression, if you can see the margin, your impression or impression material will see the margin. If you can see the margin, your scanner will see the margin. It's as simple as that.
Building on from just like, I know I'm being very specific, Niraj, but
Mm-hmm.
beyond just being able to see the margin, like as an example in my case here, I think I only used one single retraction cord here, but I could see the margins, but there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that separation
Yeah,
between. And is that what you're looking for an even crisper finish line? Is that the gums, there's actually a gap between
exactly.
the gum
That
and the margin, right?
Exactly. That's where
Mm,
the double coat's gonna help you
mm,
with that. And as long as you
mm-hmm,
wait for about 5 minutes, let that stay in that retracted position, your
mm-hmm,
double coat will definitely help you with that, or even chemical retraction paste that you can use. That will
mm-hmm.
definitely help with that.
Sure. Dentistry is stressful enough as it is. Nothing is more daunting than the prospect of a patient complaint at any point in your career, but especially as a new grad. However, thanks to Dental Protection Limited, I know I can sleep a little easier. If you've signed up as a student, you'll be automatically covered for your first 18 months of practice for free. Now, for those in the same boat as me, it is now time for us to renew our indemnity insurance before June 30. Now, I've been working alongside DPL for years now, since my student days, and they have always been such huge supporters of everything I do, including the Graduate Dentist podcast. And so I know when push comes to shove and the time calls for it, I can trust DPL to have my back and to be in my corner. With a team of experienced dental-legal consultants and an abundance of resources, including webinars, their own podcast, blog posts, and magazines, you know DPL's got you covered. Thank you, DPL, for always looking after me and for supporting the Graduate Dentist podcast. You receive a scan and your dentist hasn't fully retracted, and sometimes you have those little like soft tissue tags that are just
Yeah.
sitting over the edge of the crown.
Yes.
do you have to go around that, and does that just result in a gap in your margin, or is there a way that how do you troubleshoot those kind of areas?
That's a good question. You kind of just ignore that area and just move forward. No, I'm just kidding. What you would do in that case is you have so a lot of people, they go over that little tissue tag that's in the way, and they just make it work and just hope that the cement will fill that gap. And that's not the right way to do this. Ideally, when you're taking your scan, I think people need to get into the habit of post processing your scans while the patient's there. I find that a lot of people will take a scan. Um, for somebody who's not used to it, they take a scan, and the moment they just finish that scan, it's like, "Oof, job done." You can here's your put. You have probably your temporary ready. Put that in. See you later. I'll let you know when the crown's ready, and it's like out of there. And then you post process that, and you're like, "Ooh, let the lab technician figure that out," and you just go ahead and just set it out. Ideally, you would post process your scans right then and there in front of the patient, and you would actually see if you need to rescan or not. What I normally do is, so let's say you prep this tooth. What do you normally do for temporization? I'm guessing you would probably take like a little putty impression and you use Luxatim or Integrity and fabricate a provisional. Yeah. So you can go ahead and you have your impression. Once you've completed with your scan, do you fabricate your temporary after you're done with your scan? Yeah. So I actually will probably take my scan. With the Medit, it's very quick. I used to use a lot of Prime Scan, but it's very slow. Takes so long for you to go ahead and post process that. With Medit, it's pretty quick. With Trios and Shining, it's pretty quick, so that's good. But for the most part, if you're going to go ahead and fabricate a temporary, as soon as you finish your scan, that tissue is retracted. You can go ahead and try fabricate your provisional, and that provision will also help keep that tissue out of the way while you're fabricating it, because you still have time to adjust that provisional, clean up the margins and everything, and that's also going to be taking time. But in that time, I would post process your scan, wait till that loads up, and actually see if you need to rescan. So you're not wasting time waiting for the scanner. You're moving forward with your provisional, and once you take it out and you see that you need to fix something, you can go ahead and pack code again and just pack that and just take a rescan, and that should be fine. But obviously, that doesn't happen every time. What do you do if you've sent the scan and it's like, oh, I've got a tissue tag over here, and the patient's not coming back? So what options do I have? People, if you are experienced with understanding, again, a color model helps with that, by the way. With a color model, I can see exactly where that tissue tag stops, and I can actually physically edit things if I want. For example, it's not the ideal thing to do, and I don't always recommend this. You can actually go ahead. Let's say if you had like a little tissue tag over there, I have the option of, whoops, click the wrong one there. I have the option of actually clicking on something called edit mesh, and I'll click on the second option here. I can simply select that little portion over there. I can delete it. I can go ahead and close holes, and it'll just kind of fill right in. Do I recommend this? Not at all. But if it's in a case where I'm just being transparent over here, people have done it, I have done it, and if but again, this is just you trying for a workaround. You go ahead and you fabricate that crown in an in-house workflow. It's not that hard for you to mill another crown. It's not that cheap. I mean, it's not that expensive, but if you take this mill crown and then you go try it in the patient's mouth, you take an explorer, you feel a gap. You take an X-ray, you feel a gap. That at that point, you have to make a clinical decision that is right by the patient for whether you need to take a scan right then and there and redo that, or you just hope that the cement is going to mask that up. So that's the only advice that I can give people for that. So you can try fixing it digitally, but if that crown is not sealed, it's an ethical decision to go ahead and make sure that you fill that up by going ahead and retaking that scan and filling it up with ceramic, not with resin cement. Fill it up by going ahead, taking a rescan, mill a proper crown that fits, and then retake that. So we've done our margins right now. And again, guys, we're discussing this. We're going through the workflow step by step. But quite honestly, in terms of how quickly a crown design should take you, it
Mm.
should only take you like a minute and a half,
Yeah, for
probably
sure.
even lesser if you're quick enough.
Hmm.
Um, so we've marked our margins right now. And let's say we're happy with this. We just move forward to the next step. Mhm.
That's so
Hopefully that
interesting.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just wanted to understand, it's like, what I said, it's very easy for us to take a scan, send it off to the lab techs and like, so to our lab, and they solve all of our problems, but we don't necessarily know what it is that they're doing to troubleshoot these areas and what they're, muttering under
Exactly.
their breath about
Yeah,
about the things that we've done to make them difficult. But no, I'm
exactly.
very happy with that. Let's move on to our next step then,
Of
Niraj.
course. And
Mm-hmm.
just quickly,
Mm.
even lab techs have the option of doing something called what's called free-forming on exocad. They can actually smoothen the margins as well by using like a tiny brush. They will even sometimes just smoothen it. And again, if you're experienced enough and you understand where the continuity of the margin is, that's fine. But again, clinical decision when you insert the crown is very critical. You can't just get away with just putting it in and just getting away with it. Okay, so moving forward, the crown bottoms is basically it looks at two things. One is the insertion axis for those of you who use CEREC, and then you also have something called cement spacer. Now, this is something I saw in your design as well, so I just want to point that out. You see here, you've got this little cement spacer that's just it's just so thick, right? So there was like an unnecessary overhang from where the margin begins all the way up until here. This is basically the software just, it's quality control. The software is basically milling thicker margins so that you're not going to go back and say, oh, the software designed something thinner. You people don't even notice this. They go ahead and just mill the margin on the default settings and they have these thick overhangs. And as long as it doesn't break, the software has not done anything wrong. The milling has not done anything wrong. But then clinically, you will see that overhang. So you'd have to understand that even this is adjustable. So even in CEREC, for a lot of people, when they're at the step of it's called restoration parameters on CEREC, you can actually go there. You'll notice that a lot of those things are locked, but you can click the lock button, you can unlock it, and you can tweak and open up those settings. And people actually adjust these settings as well in CEREC. Same thing in exocad. I can move forward to something called border. If you actually take a look at this, I don't need a 2.2 millimeter um, thickness horizontally. I actually take that down to about 0.1. You see how much that shaved off right there? And if I take this down from 0.3 to about 0.1, there you go. This is probably how much I have. I don't want that thick overhang like how I had it before. This is a significant difference to what it was. And if I actually open up your case and then we see the crown that you designed, and I simply tweak this and then I say okay, you will actually see how your crown shrinks at that gingival third. It actually shrinks and removes all that overhang much nicer. So this is the only thing that I go ahead and tweak, and that's something that I want to point out to a lot of people.
So, what were the names of those two things that you tweaked, Niraj?
So this is horizontal. It's actually the full name is horizontal crown margin. It was available in the beginning prescription
Yeah, you did
stage as
mention that
well.
before. Yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
In the advanced parameters. So you can actually tweak this to 0.1 and it will just remember it for all of your cases. So yes, you could just do it right here. And just to be safe, it'll remember for all of your cases. I just wanted to show people that you can also tweak that while you're doing your design. And that's something that you can
So
do.
that was the horizontal thickness.
Yes, the horizontal crown margin is what the full name is, and this is called angled crown margin, and I take them down to 0.1.
Mm-hmm. So is that determining the minimal thickness in that area, or what is it actually
If
adjusting?
so, if
Mm.
you notice over here, we've got these pictorials, and again, so this is something that's helpful. Remember that little question mark helpful that I told you? In every step, you see a question mark over here, you see a question mark over here. Each and every step that you go through, this question mark's going to be there. So again, you can just go ahead and click that and it will come up with the exocad wiki and tell you everything in terms of all of the doubts that you have. But basically this horizontal margin and the angle one, it simply removes that thick emergence or that unnecessary overhang that the software has got into it that you don't actually need.
But they've created that just so that it's thick enough in that area, but we don't need it to be
It's
thick
thick
in
enough.
that area. Yeah.
Exactly. So they just make it thick enough so that nobody can blame the software because it milled perfectly thick. There's no milling failures. And you've got a nice thick restoration that's going to stay in there. But then clinically, when you try that in, that overhang's going to bother any clinician when we put that on there. And I'll explain when we go on to the onlay case how these also matter, because for the onlay, you want to have absolutely no overhangs. You want it to have a nice flush margin, especially for your Instagram photos. I mean, you got to take that nice flush looking margin. So it's very
Because otherwise
important.
it's like a mushroom. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll show you how you can even adjust that on this. So these are my settings that I go ahead and change, and I'll just go ahead and hit OK. So minimum thickness over here, we've got this red over here that actually dials in a minimum thickness from where your crown prep is to about here. You actually have the option of clicking on something here called the cut view, and I can just simply drop something in there. I'll actually uncheck that. The shortcut for that is Control Shift C. I like using the shortcut because when I actually choose the view that I want to work in and I hold Control Shift C, it didn't do what I was expecting. Okay, never mind. So I actually have to rotate this, which is what I wanted to do. So when I rotate that and I actually get a nice cross section of it, I can see precisely how much of minimum thickness I'm dealing with over here by simply going ahead and measuring that. So this one's got about a 1.6. Again, this is just the software being on the safe side and just giving me something that's so much thicker. For Emacs, you want to be about 1.2. You can go a bit thicker, obviously, when you're dealing with more load-bearing areas and functional cusps. Like in this case, for the buccal cuts, you want to make sure. But I think a 1.6, let's just keep it at the default that they've got over here just to move through the workflow of things. So the next step in the workflow is going to be, it drops this tooth over here. And I'm sure you've seen this when you were going to go ahead and design. By the way, this restoration looks very nice and white because I've got this true smile on. It just makes it look prettier, like I said. So it's good for photos. So in this step, you'll see that the anatomy started becoming quite flat. The reason is it started adapting everything to that upper cusp that's in the way, and it just flattened that out completely. I want to have freedom of this. So I actually go ahead and click on this option that says no adaptation. So it gives me the original tooth in terms of what it actually looks like. And then I want to go ahead and tweak this tooth to what I actually like. Even at this point, I have the option of choosing tooth libraries because I don't think this tooth library actually fits into these proximal contacts quite well. I can actually click on tooth library. Let's say if I change to another library, I click on the one below. I've got a new tooth library over here. This is actually a denture tooth library, but it fits well. So let's go ahead and use it. What the heck? So you can see that it actually fills up those proximal contacts quite nicely. And I simply have to edit it by just adding a little bit over here just to close that gap and have it nice and thick.
When you're choosing the tooth, is it mainly, do you have go-to ones that you always use, or do you judge it based on the proximal contacts? Like you mentioned, oh, it has nice contacts. Is that like how do you decide which
for
library
for
you use?
for single crowns, I go based on the space that I have over here. It just, because if I look at the previous one, which was this, it looks like it's too bulky in the buccal, and it just looks like it has point contacts over here, which I'm going to be sitting and contouring and adjusting. I just switched between library because for single crowns I can find something better. This one has a wide proximal contact, so that works for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick with this one over here, and I'm just going to move forward with that. Now, you have all of these options here that you can go ahead and click. This option gives you the ability to freeform tooth parts. What it means that I can select just a little part over there. I can just select a certain cusp and move forward. This is the same thing as when you have edit restoration and CEREC, where you can actually adjust the anatomical. They have something called 2-directional, 4-directional, all kinds of stuff if you use CEREC, but this is basically the freedom that you get from all of these. What I personally like to go on to, I actually work mostly off something called expert mode. Do you know the difference between wizard and expert mode?
Please tell me.
So wizard mode is basically where you have pop-up prompts like this that comes up in every single step, right? And you go for a next step, next step. But I actually click on expert mode, and what I do is under expert mode, you can actually see all of these tools that pop up over here, which is essentially the exact same tools that were present in the wizard mode step. It's just that when I click on expert mode, I have all these options down over here because I know what the next step is going to be. So I don't normally tend to work on the wizard mode option, and that's the reason for it. Sorry, it adapted something there, so I'm just going to reset that. Okay, so what I normally do is, like I said, I go to expert mode, and my way of actually adapting my tooth formation, I click on something called tooth placement. Now, again, we have so many options over here. I'll just break it down to what's simple. We use the simple function over here, move and scale in all directions. I just simply move it approximately to the area that I want. I'm pressing A to toggle the visibility of my upper arch as well, because that's the antagonist. And I always go to advanced, and I always click on this option over here, which lets me basically play around with whichever cusp I want and move things and just fill up the gaps. As you can see, it's so easy for me to go ahead and contour these. The option in CEREC for something like this would be the 2-directional tool is what it is. So I'm just going to go ahead and adapt all of these things. I can actually make my scan a little bit more transparent, and I can fill in that contact space that I need. This over here is a pretty wide contact, but I can fill that up, drop down those lingual cusps, Now, then one thing that I'm seeing over here, which a lot of people don't notice, is that this is my minimum thickness that it's actually getting into the room. So that's something which people also often fail to adjust. So what I normally do in that step is, we saw that in the cross section that this was about 1.6, which is a bit much. And over here, we don't need 1.6 millimeters of cross section over there. So in that case, what I would do is, you actually can right click. You can have the option of choosing your set minimum thickness. Again, on CEREC, you would go ahead and click on the restoration parameters. It's the same thing. I just have the option of right clicking and seeing all these tools. I have something called set minimum thickness. I can actually bring my minimum thickness down. It did say 1, but for some reason it shows us 1.6. So we'll just bring it down a little bit further and just hit apply.
Because you
And when I
did at
take,
the very beginning, you did set it as 1, but
I did set it as 1, but it
mm,
seems to have, that's about 1.1. That's something that I can work with. Let's say if I want to take it down just a little bit,
mm,
and I'm just going to hit OK with that. So it
mhm,
doesn't end up becoming a bulky crown for me, and I still am within my minimum thickness, as I can see
yeah.
over here.
Mhm,
So I still, it says 1.8 at that point,
mhm.
which is a bit, I think that's just with the measurement angle. Okay, there we go. Yeah, 1.2. That's what we got. It was just in a weird
So
angle that I did the cross section.
when you were toggling that button to see the cross section, was that the
Mm-hmm.
C shift? Could
Correct. The Control Shift C that you see over here. I choose the view that I want, Control Shift C, and I just drop this little tool over here that I can choose my cross section, and I can measure things as I go about. But again, the more you do this, you will feel like there's no reason for you to even go ahead and use that. So now adjusting these contacts is always what's tricky for people. Again, I always work in expert mode, and I always work with tooth placement. I showed you that I used a simple function to just move things up and down or to the side. And I use this advanced tool, and I use this third option, which a lot of people don't use. And I go ahead and I tweak these contact points and so forth. You also have a third function, which is this one. If I click on that and I simply hold down the shift button, I'm holding down shift right now, and then this is what pops up. I can actually pull up just certain areas that I need to scale. So rather than scaling the entire tooth like this, I'm only scaling certain areas that I want. If I just want to scale up just that buccal distal buccal surface over there, it just tweaks that and sort of fits into the space. And I can actually play around with this as much as I want. There's just so much of freedom with this. So I just play around with this tool, and I get it to where I need things to be. But the next option that I choose to adjust these occlusal contacts super easy. And this is another thing that I think a lot of people don't use. So I can actually select this option, and I can actually select these two options. What it does is, this one over here, it says instant anatomic morphing based on the minimum thickness. So it's going to take into consideration my minimum thickness and change the morphology. And this one also will consider my anatomic morphing with the antagonist, which means in relation to the opposing cusp as well. Does that make sense? So I'll show you what these functions do. If I actually go ahead and use this tool, you see it starts adjusting things to where I need to be. Now, this is all areas that look a little bit flat because of minimum thickness, but this is just a tool where if you have enough of tooth reduction, if you have enough space, it'll automatically drop everything down, starting from high occlusal points to just bring it down exactly, forming that same morphology, and just brings it down to the occlusion that you need. So that's just another tip that people can use in a lot of cases. But in this case, I'm just going to work with our tool, bring this down to where it needs to be. I need to increase the thickness just in these areas. I am going to use my rotational tools and just tweak certain things. Okay, so the remainder of all of this, I usually check it in the next step. So in the wizard step, if I go back to that, the next step after placing a tooth in there, which actually I'll go back to where we were.
I'm going to just commentate whilst you're doing this, Neeraj, because I appreciate that a lot of this is second nature to you,
Yeah.
and you do it without necessarily having to think too much about it when you're like, this is where the tooth needs to be placed. But I guess for our newbies who like haven't really worked much with this before, it can be overwhelming. Even just, I think, trying to do too many steps all at once. But I think like what you're doing, like step by step, if we just do a little recap, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
we've adjusted our settings, you've got your tooth, you've chosen a tooth that seems to fit that space based off our library.
Yep.
with nice broad contacts, positioning it, lining it up. I This was a tip that I got from my principal dentist, but it's just something so simple that you don't necessarily think of. But like ensuring that your fissures are in line, and then like your buccal cusp, like the slant of it is in line with the teeth in front and behind, like something like that, that you can get really tunnel vision just looking at it from one view and not actually assess how it sits in the whole arch. That's what you're assessing when you're doing your tooth positioning, right?
Exactly. And honestly,
Mm,
you can choose different views. Like for example, if I hold this
mm,
occlusal view,
mhm,
I click on add custom view. This is
mhm,
now custom view one, which is my occlusal. I can change
mm,
this to this view, add another one. I can change to this view, and
mhm,
I can simply switch between views as I
mm,
need. This
mhm,
helps me kind of like move faster to the area that I want and
mhm.
just tweak everything that I need to. And that's it's just as easy as that.
Yeah.
I can actually even name these to be, I can rename this and say occlusal view. So I know for a fact that this is my occlusal, and I can simply just go back and forth between these. And it's pretty much that easy for me to have that tunnel vision, like you said, and give me that
Mm,
freedom to see exactly what I need to adjust.
mhm,
So I'll go ahead and quickly move forward to the next step. We are dealing
mhm,
with some minimum thickness issues over here,
mhm,
but let's just say that everything is dialed in. Now, this is my tooth placement step.
mm,
Normally, if I went through the wizard workflow, it'll take me to the next step, which is my freeform, but I'm
mhm,
working right now on expert mode.
mhm,
But freeform is our next tool. Oh, sorry, we've got adapt. So this is just the tooth placed in there, but we
mhm,
needed this to adapt into our margins right now. So the
mhm.
next step is going to be adapt. You can actually see that when you're working in expert mode and you go down, everything gets highlighted to the next step.
Yep.
So you may not have the wizard mode that switches between each step, but you have the expert mode that actually highlights the next step for you, and you simply click that, and it
Mm,
simply pulls everything towards the margin there for you.
mhm,
Now, in the this area over here that's quite thick, I can go ahead and smoothen this down just to remove that unnecessary thickness over here. But you actually will notice that my margins over here are nice and flushed.
yeah.
In the case where in one of your cases when you went ahead and did your design, this margin was not that flush. It was actually had um
That bulbosity.
that bulbosity over there, that little
Yeah.
hump over there,
Yeah.
which could affect the emergence. So I'm gonna go ahead and smoothen this thing, and it gives me the freedom to go ahead and really make that margin looking nice and crisp.
Mm,
And one thing that people look at is they look at the occlusal contacts and they're thinking, how do I look at my proximal contacts as well?
mhm.
We're diving into some minimum thickness issues over there.
Oops.
Now, I think that has more to do with the software's minimum thickness that it was set. So I'll
Mm,
just dial that down a little bit. I actually take this down to about here. Understanding this minimum thickness is a whole other discussion, but we'll,
I
we'll not
know.
worry about that right now.
Yeah.
But now let's just say that we have everything adapted over here. All I need to do is freeform, which is what I was using, and I just
Mhm,
simply smoothen everything to make sure everything is good. But
mhm,
people normally are wondering, where's my proximal contacts? I see these little color codings over here that I
mhm,
can go ahead and tweak this, but how do I actually check for my proximal contacts? Normally people don't have this dialed in, and I
mm,
actually switched my exocad to the default mode, like to how it was set up, so that people can actually see what's missing when you actually start off with exocad. So I don't have my preset settings that actually pop up. But
mhm,
normally people forget that there's an option over here. If you
mhm,
actually click on this drop down list, right
mhm.
now it's showing you your antagonist contacts in relation to your upper jaw, but it's not showing you your adjacent contacts, and that's what's missing. You can
Um,
you can also see the contacts of your adjacent teeth as well. So this is normally what people have turned off, and that's why they don't see these contacts, which I think in your design you went ahead and had that, which is good. So
mhm,
you obviously knew that that thing was missing. So you can now see your contacts and just make your adjustments like you would on CEREC. Make this a much wider contact as you will,
mhm,
flatten this out. And as far as settings go in terms of what I have over here,
mhm,
people can make these adjustments pretty simply by going on adapt, and they can click on these two options that they have over here, which is
mm,
called static occlusion, where if I go ahead and click that, I actually will keep that on, just keep that on zero. And if I go ahead and click static occlusion, it will actually adjust my occlusion into that space right then and there. So it's actually adjusted the occlusion. And a zero is normally, it's normally pretty similar to what your adjacent teeth are as well. So I normally keep it at about a zero, but this has to do with what sort of mill you have. And there's a lot of things to understand. Even that sometimes you might find that if something is in hyperocclusion or it's in hypoocclusion, you feel that you need to change the contacts every now and then, it depends on the way that your mill works as well. Once
Mm,
you find the setting that works for you, in
mm.
some cases you can actually go down to a negative even, just to have that contact exactly what you want. So you would test these out in different workflows. I know some labs, for example, they will like even have something like a negative zero point 0.4, again, that has to go with their mills and how much more of a high contact you want to have in your design, and whether that's being replicated in your mill, if that makes sense.
Sure. So here we see like these blue occlusal contacts. Blue is
Yes.
representing the zero.
The zero, exactly, the zero that I have.
Which would that mean, that is that indicating like how much space is between this and the antagonist tooth?
No, that's actually yeah, that's not the space, it's more the
Mhm.
contact point. So
Yeah.
this is actually exactly touching at that point, if you notice
So
over
it's
here.
exactly touching one
It's
another, right?
exactly touching one
Whereas if
another.
you had negative, then it would be, I guess, tighter, heavier in
Eh,
occlusion.
if you had a negative, it'll be heavier in occlusion, correct?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it's easier. I mean, you should ideally, if you have your settings right, you shouldn't be adjusting your crowns in the mouth, but you would rather have something slightly higher than slightly under, because then you have to send that back for them to add porcelain, or you have to remill something. So it's just easier to go ahead and have that. So in normal cases, people usually have negatives, or usually a bang on zero. And if you have a good quality mill, that usually gets it exactly right. In terms of contacts as well, you have the option of clicking on adapt. If you have this on zero, you can just click a proximal, and that just dials that right in, and it just simply removes that contact. This is all tissue that is factored into it, but I can go ahead and just simply smoothen that out, and that's perfectly fine. And I can just smoothen out this contact over here. I can make it slightly wider if I want. You'll notice that I'm moving quickly because I actually have shortcuts over here. If you see, if I hover my mouse over there, you can see that it says hotkey number 1. And if I hover over here, you see it says hotkey number 2 on the bottom. So these hotkeys actually help me move forward between adding and removing. And I can press 2 and it goes to the smooth tool. And I simply work off of both of these tools, and I can just get a quick design and so forth. So let's just say we're happy with that. We're happy with our proximal contacts. Everything's looking good. If we don't have any tweaks, we simply just move forward. It talks about some interferences, but we've already checked that we're happy with the zero. So we just simply have to move forward to the next step, which is merge and save restorations, which is the same as if you were in CEREC, that you would move forward to the, I think it's called finalize, and then export, which is basically what this step is. One tip one tip that I do want to add though. So again, going through these entire steps, it should only take about a minute and a half. But one thing a lot of people, one thing a lot of people don't understand in terms of how this would work for a CEREC milling machine. With a CEREC milling machine, something is automatic in terms of how it is milled. If you've designed and milled in CEREC, you will notice that if you look at the undersurface of the crown, do you notice like little like burr holes or burr indentations in there? Have you seen that?
I've seen that it's where they've like over milled those areas, right?
Exactly. And that's
Mm.
intentional by Sarah, because they want you to overmill those areas so that you can have a much better fit. And I would rather they have that than have something that's a tight fit, and then somebody has to, check if the fit of it is too tight. Some people are like, "Ooh, should I just adjust the intaglio?" And some people actually do that. They just probably, don't tell people about it. I've done it as
Yeah,
well in some cases. But the
yeah.
way to work around this on exocad for a lot of people who use CEREC is, if I actually go back to, I'll just go ahead and delete the design. I can actually go back to this bottom step, which
Mm.
had to do with choosing my, what do you
When we
call
did
this?
the
My adaptation.
horizontal
Yeah,
margin, right?
the
Hmm.
adaptation of my design. You
Mm.
actually will go to a step called advanced, and they have something over here for those people who are working with CEREC milling machines and working with prime mills. There's an option over here to take into consideration of that milling burr. It's called a blue nose or a flat tool, which is pretty similar to the CEREC S12s that you have. I think it's called an S12. Um, the burr that CEREC has is about 1.27, and you have to have this option over here selected to about 90, and you got to hit apply. This is something which a lot of people don't know about. If you're using exocad to go into a CEREC machine, this might seem complicated, but since this is being recorded, people can just go ahead and look at this and take a picture. But once you have this set, you can have it's just set permanently. You don't have to change it every time for each case. So you just have to do it once, and you'll actually notice if I move forward to finishing my design and I say okay, do you see that difference? This is what you would see in SEC.
Is this only for if you are using a CEREC, or what happens if you're using like a different mill? Why don't you necessarily need this step if you were using something else?
It depends on the thickness of the burr that you're using. So for
Oh, okay.
CEREC,
Mm,
you've got the two motor mills,
mm,
which are the previous MCXs, and then you have the MCXLs, which are the four motor mills, the four-axis mills, and then you've
mm,
also got the primal, which is another four-axis mill. So
mm,
those ones will have certain burrs that are quite thick, and it
mm,
needs to accommodate for that,
mm.
because otherwise the burr won't overmill that area, and you'll end up actually having, it's not an undercut on your prep, but it's kind of an undercut on your restoration. And a
Mm.
lot of people, they have misfits with CEREC when they design on exocad because they don't know about the option that I showed you just before.
Sure. Okay.
So so this is something, when you look at that, and this, you don't see that in there. That's because you probably forgot that option, because
Hmm.
CEREC accounts for that over milling, which a lot of people forget about. So for
Hmm.
those of you who still want to try go into exocad, and you have a CEREC milling machine, and you want to
Hmm.
go ahead and mill on CEREC, this is the option that you're missing out in that. So that's just an extra tip for those who didn't know about that.
Sure.
Mhm. So again, as far as the workflow goes, I'm sure it's not too different from what you would have gone ahead and done. The only
Mm,
tip that I would say is about feathering in that margin by changing that bottom setting over there. And the other thing
mhm,
is, if you're milling with CEREC to
mhm.
account for something like this, it's important to go ahead and know that bullnose function that I told you about.
There is so much we want to learn as new grads that dental school doesn't expose us to. One thing, of course, being the world of clear aligners. But where do we even start? Fortunately for me, I've been lucky to be taken under the wings of Angel Aligner. With over 20 years of experience in innovation and research and over 1 million smiles transformed, Angel stands as the second largest aligner company in the world for volume. With their competitive pricing, rapid turnaround time, and phenomenal support team, Angel is second to none. Last year, I had the unique experience of taking on my very first aligner case whilst undergoing aligner treatment myself, and it is so fascinating being able to experience treatment firsthand and fully understand the ins and outs of what my patients are going through as well. It was such a streamlined process from start to finish. Angel's iAuthor treatment planning software is incredibly user-friendly, particularly for a grad. Their team, overseen by trained dentists and orthodontists, work tirelessly around the clock to deliver your treatment plans within days, sometimes hours, so you aren't stuck waiting around for weeks on ends to deliver your patient care. High quality and with unique scalloped edges that make them both hygienic and super comfortable to wear, both my patients and I have been so pleased with the experience. Thank you, Angel Aligner, for guiding me through the world of clear aligners and for supporting the Graduate Dentist podcast. No, this was really, really fascinating, Raj, because it was interesting watching you go through it. But that, I think for me, what stuck was the commentary of what are you thinking at each step, and also how quickly you flip between everything. I think I'm glad this is
Yeah,
recorded because it's like,
yeah.
oh, I think some of those steps, even for our listeners, everything's all recorded and you can follow along with like the actual video screen share of it.
I just wanted to show people, in terms of the emergence of that crown, I
Yeah,
want to show them what it would look like in your case. Let's go ahead and
yeah.
open up what we had. Again, beautiful design, no problems with the design. I just wanted to talk about the margin adaptability. No comments
Mhm.
here.
Yeah, no, go for it. I also noticed the difference with the contacts. I think you just had the blue contact for like our interproximals, but I've always done it to like I think just under green.
Yeah. I usually have them in the blue contact. That blue generally indicates, good contact. If you actually, yeah, if you actually notice over here, if it's in green, if you look at the colors, and again, I don't know why they chose blue. Maybe they just like blue. But green, you can see over here, is actually a higher contact, whereas blue is the one that's the green in CEREC. Let's just say that. So if we look at this one over here, you can actually see that little lip that I'm referring to. If I actually zoom in right over here, it's not something, when you get a crown back from the lab, the first thing you want to see is take out the temp, clean up the cement, put the crown, it fits, thank God. And it's like, okay, I can move forward. But these are things that people sort of miss out on. And it just takes a few seconds to just sort of adjust that. But this kind of ledge that you have over there, if I actually go to the bottom tool, you see that little overhang that it's just put it in there without even asking you. It's because of these tools over here. If I take this down to 0.1, and I'll take this down to 0.1 as well, wherever 0.1 is. Okay. So let's say I hit OK. You'll actually notice how your crown, watch how it adapts. You see all of that overhang that necessarily what was there. It's not something that you should be having when you're going in and designing crowns. So that's probably the only thing that I would um, that I would recommend in terms of adjusting that. But as far as design goes, you've done a great job. Everything looks good. It's just a matter of knowing how to finish that margin much better, because when you try it in the mouth, you might end up wanting to adjust that if you look at that overhand, and now it's like, oh, I got to glaze this again, and it's extra work.
I think particularly this overhang area is really evident when we were talking about onlay design. So I think this is a really nice segue into the
Exactly.
second design, because that's the one thing that I always feel like I really struggle is designing onlays on exocad, and then I'm like, oh, it's such a blob, and I get that
Yeah.
huge like mushroom effect of it over the tooth.
For the onlay one, it
Mm.
actually they have an additional tool on that, which is also something that I'll probably go ahead and show you. So we've got our onlay design over here. So you see that overhang margin there again. Okay, you don't have a flushed margin, which when you go ahead and bond this in, you will see that quite vividly. So you want to make sure that you actually don't have that. So again, let's go back to um, I have to first delete the restoration that was designed. So I'll go ahead and click delete. By the way, for those of you, in case you didn't know, when I click on this, we're on export mode right now. You'll see that I don't have any options over here. And I'm thinking, what happened to all of my tools and my functions? That's because all of them disappeared the moment you went to your final restoration, which exocad calls as your merge restoration. So all I got to do is I say delete reconstruction, and good thing this is recorded so people can slow it down. I click on delete reconstructions and I just say okay to my merged parts. Now I have all of my tools coming back in, all my freeform, my bottoms, and everything. That's because it locked in that design, and the software doesn't want you to tweak that design, so it kind of like locks you into it. Now, let's see how we can go ahead and make this margin looking a lot better. As far as the design goes, good job, no comments there. It's just the tweaking of the margins, which I'll click on this, and I simply click on create inlay bottoms. Again, same thing, my border, this is already on 0. So this is what I wanted to point out. For an inlay and onlay, they have the option where it's already kind of flushed in there, so they take it down to 0. And so at this point, a lot of people are like, oh, I've already taken my margins to 0, so why do I have this overhang over here? And a lot of people don't know. So the way that you can fix this is on the inlay onlay setting, you can actually right click your restoration, and if you go onto the set minimum thickness, you will notice that if you go back to the recording, guys, and you actually see, you would have these two options where we adjusted the occlusal minimum thickness, and you would not have seen this option over here called border taping, border taper, sorry. So I can actually, this border over here, which is right now set at thick, I can dial that up to say, hey, make it a little bit thinner, especially at the border. I want that to be tapered in. And let's go ahead and hit apply. Do you really want to make this change? I'll say yes. So it actually will start feathering that in, and it'll give me the option to smoothen that down even further. Let me see if I can make my, does it let me make it transparent? But if I made this transparent, what it essentially does is it reduces the unnecessary minimum thickness that you have over there, just so you can have a nice feathered in margin. You don't necessarily want, you see that minimum thickness is gone in. It was actually bulked out quite a bit, but now if you see the red minimum thickness, it's actually gone in further. You don't need to have that thick of a margin in there. You're going to go ahead and bond this in. It's going to do a good job. You want that occlusal minimum thickness, but you don't need that on the axial. So I've done this and I hit OK. So when I'm sure, Erica, when you were trying to smoothen this before, you would have seen the reds pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, let me, well, I'll show it later. But when those reds pop up and you smoothen it in, when you go ahead and you go to your final step where you're finalizing your restoration, it'll bulk this back up just to fill in. Exactly, good. So that's what bulks it back up. But now that I've changed that border taper, if I actually go to my freeform and I go to my smooth tool, and a lot of people don't know how to use that for the border taper. You see how it doesn't bother me anymore because now the
Mm.
minimum thickness is not in the
Oh,
way.
it's so nice.
Yeah, exactly. So now this
Yeah.
is this is going to be Instagram ready. So I can go ahead and smooth that in.
Yeah.
And I've got nice flush margins. Take a look on the lingual side
Yeah.
as well. Go ahead and
It's so
smooth that in.
chunky. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you see here, guys, if I hover my mouse on top of this, I've got smooth, but you can see in one of the pop-ups, it says if you hold shift, it'll flatten it. So that's quite a strong smooth. So this is me just regularly smoothing it. This is if I hold shift, it flattens it down as well. So I kind of, rather than me holding it all the way and just pressing the shift down and jamming it, I actually tap my shift in increments. And I just shift, tap, 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 and I just kind of blend that in as much as I can. Then without holding the shift, I just kind of go all over it. So you can see that those margins just are just much nicer at that border, and that's what's going to get you your nice designs. And now if I move forward and I go ahead and I say merge and save, it's not going to bulk that portion up. And you can see that you've got a nice seamless margin over there, which you didn't have before, simply because of that minimum thickness issue that you had. And this is another fix around that for inlays and onlays. So don't need to go to the whole design steps on these, but this is basically the only additional tip that I have for inlays and onlays.
And I think just reiterating what you were saying, it's because the program is designed to ensure that there's minimum thickness all the way around, but in reality we want those minimum thicknesses in the occlusal load bearing areas, but along the margins, particularly for like a bonded onlay, you don't need that minimum thickness because we're bonding it in and it's at the margins there.
Exactly. Just make sure you have your minimum thicknesses, especially in your functional cusp areas. But for the most part, for inlays and onlays, you just want to have a nice seamless margin that when you put this in, you shouldn't be able to notice that there's a
Feel,
margin in
yeah.
there, other than if
Mhm.
the shade is off or so forth. But
Yeah.
in CEREC, for example, when somebody sets up a CEREC machine in your office, maybe they don't tell you, but they will actually tweak the stuff in your CEREC machine. And that's probably, if you have a good reseller and somebody who's got that setup done, that's probably what they normally do. And then it looks a lot more seamless in that case. But this is just the way
Mhm.
that you would tweak this in exocad.
Mhm. Yeah. That was super informative, Niraj. Like, I feel like it's just helped answer so many questions that when I'm just clicking next, I don't know why. And it's just the whole, I want it to look this particular way, but I don't know how to get it to look that particular way. But then also, it's just respecting all these fundamental design principles, knowing what things can I touch and what things can't I touch. Because the concept, I think, to many is I don't want to mess around with the settings. If it tells me that's the minimum thickness, I don't want to mess with it. But like, it's really reassuring hearing from you what are things that are must haves that you have to abide
Yeah,
by, and what are the things that no, it's okay, you can change that, it's okay if you adjust those things to get a good outcome. um
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
I used to have a professor in my residency, and he used to always get these crowns from labs, and he's like, "Oh, I always have to adjust the crowns. I'm always taking a bird to it and making it feathered." And I'm like, "Why don't you just tweak it in the software?" He's just like, "The labs don't do it." I
Mm.
said, "There is a way," and then I showed him this, and he's like, "Why don't the labs know this?" I'm like, "I have no idea. Don't ask me."
No,
Yeah,
that's awesome. Like, it really helps clarify when I say, like, I'll send the same, I'll do a scan and then I'll send it to a lab and then look at the one that I've designed. And some of the other dentists within my group have made the same comments. Like, they'll give it a go trying to design on exocad. And you're like, it just doesn't look the way that it is when the lab
yeah.
does it. But this is an insight into, well, what are the things that the lab is doing? They're using the same program that we are, but what are those additional things that they're able to tweak to get a good outcome? So, yeah, this was really great.
Oh, good. I'm glad it was helpful. Yeah. And this especially appears for veneers as well. Especially, you want to make sure that they have a nice margin in there. For veneers, you will have this option that says border taper, where you make it nice and thin and you make sure that it's nice and flushed with your finish line. Or if you're doing no prep, you can even make sure it's super thin and make sure it just flushes in.
No, I know when we were brainstorming before recording, you're like, "Are we just going to focus on single units, or do you want to go into like fancier things?" I'm like, "Let's just start off with this," because I think there are so many just like little questions, and I'm always big on mastering the basics and understanding the fundamentals and leaving no rock unturned. So thank you for entertaining all the millions of questions that I
No,
had
absolutely.
just when it comes to this. But I feel like I need to bring you back for another episode to dive into like the other, world of digital dentistry when it comes to like smile design and opening video. I had questions that I wanted to ask you with, how you design like a full smile in relation to like facial proportions and overlaying images and opening video, which I think is crazy, but I think it's a whole separate can of worms.
More,
and
more than happy to go into
a
it.
topic
Yes.
for another day. Nash, I'm going to wrap up the episode because I know you've been so generous with your time, and I really thank you for going through all of that. I feel like I learned so much, and I'm so glad that it was recorded so that hopefully it empowers our listeners, people that may have similar software within their practice that they've been too scared to touch.
Yeah.
They can kind of just have our recording next to them as
Absolutely.
we go through step by
Pause
step
it when
what
they
you need
need.
to do. Yeah, I think this is like a really, really great resource for people. So I wanted to thank you for your time, and ask you perhaps, as someone that is going through their journey, and you are very much at the beginnings of it all, but I think I'm very fortunate that I get to talk to a superstar in the making because I know you've got big plans with, opening up your practice and all the projects and all these yeah, things that you are working on. But I wanted to know, as someone who is also early on in your career, who's been exposed to so many things, given our audience are students and new grads and people also early on in their journey, do you have any pieces of advice or things that you think you'd like to leave people with?
But I would say dentistry is not that intimidating. It is just a matter of how much of work you're willing to put into it. And I just think every day, the more questions you have, as long as you're one step closer to finding an answer to at least one of those questions, you are moving forward. And that's as simple as that. I wouldn't be so intimidated to think that I don't know everything yet. Trust me, nobody knows everything. Not even specialists know everything. Trust me. Even though we have a specialist degree, it's not like we have all the answers sorted out. We are learning every single day. So I would just say for a lot of the new grads, step by step, everybody's going to get there, and just do good dentistry for what you can for your patients.
What you say there reminds me of a conversation I had with one of my really good friends just yesterday, actually. And it ties in with what you said at the beginning, where I said you had all these questions as a lab tech, and then you decided to do your specialty training. I said, did that answer your questions? And you said, yes, it answered all those questions, but now I have more questions.
More questions. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's the ongoing journey as these clinicians. And when I was talking to my friend yesterday, he's just like, oh, I thought I knew a lot, but then I did further studies, and then I realized there's so much more that I don't know. And we can be really, it's easy to be harsh on ourselves, and it can be a bit discouraging because you feel like I still don't know so much. But then I think it's important, like you said, to kind of take a step back and realize, even though I don't know a lot, the fact that I've gone on this journey to find these answers, I know so much more than I did a year ago when I didn't even know the answer to those basic things, right? So
100%. I used to think of myself, oh my God, I have so many questions. But now the situation is, after having done specialty, one good thing is I'm not just asking questions anymore. I'm actually answering questions for a lot of people. And
yeah.
it's fortunate that I
Mhm.
have that kind of experience. And, I'm confident enough to reach that point where I'm able to answer some questions now. So that's always good. But you're always going to be learning. There's always going to be questions that need to be asked, and it just never stops.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Niraj, for your time. I've had such a wonderful conversation and really enjoyed everything that we've dived into and talked about. So thank you for answering all of my questions today.
No,
Um,
absolutely. Anytime.
and I look forward to, yeah, hopefully when you come make your trip over to Australia, we'll see you
Yeah, looking
then.
forward to it. No, thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure for me. I had so much of fun. It's good to have company when you're designing rather than just maybe watching a movie by yourself and doing it. So it's good. So thank you so much.
And thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Graduate Dentist Podcast. I really hope you've taken something valuable away from this episode and that you feel heard, you feel seen, inspired, and optimistic about our journey as graduate dentists. As I always say, we're in it together, so let's spread the word, let's share the love, send this to your friends, your colleagues, and those who are on a similar path who you feel may benefit from being part of the community. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so send me a message, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time for another episode.